Hey everybody, and welcome back to the board meeting. Today we're doing another R&R reviews and ratings of all the games I've been playing in the last week or two with friends, family, and a few games solo here and there even. And I usually only have like 10 or 11 games on here, but this last week I hosted a Zappapalooza, which is kind of a bigger board game event that we have here. I mean, small for other places, but big for my small town. So we played a bunch of games. So this week I actually have 26 games, I believe, on this list. So without any more further ado, let's get to the games. First off, we have Dungeon Mayhem. And Dungeon Mayhem, I would say, is a kids card game where players will be fighting each other until only one player remains. Each turn you will draw a card and play a card. There's only a few things the cards do, whether it's healing, attacking, shielding, or getting to draw even more cards. It is a very simple game, and I say a great family game. My son and I have played this game at this point probably close to 100 times. This game gets a 7 from me, and a high recommendation for anyone with younger children in their family. Now from one card game to another, Go Nuts for Donuts. Go Nuts for Donuts is essentially a sequel to Sushi Go. You are trying to collect all these different donuts, and all of the different donuts score in different unique set collecting ways, much like Sushi Go. Except this time, donuts will be set out underneath numbers, and all the players have those numbers as cards. If you want a certain donut, you have to pick that numbered card. All players secretly do this and then reveal their card at the same time. If anyone else picks the number you did, you both get nothing. Everyone else who picked a donut number that no one else picked, they get that numbered donut. The problem is, you are constantly picking the same numbers. You could finish this game with literally 0 donuts in front of you if you're unlucky enough. This was such a flop for me, giving it a 5 rating, and I think I'm being nice for that. I only played this game twice, but that was enough for me to decide this won't be staying in my collection. Moving on to a popular game now with Santorini. Santorini is a 2-player abstract game where players are trying to build and climb to a 3rd tier of a building. This is all about blocking your opponents off and positioning yourself in a spot your opponents can't mess with you. You can play that way, which is an extremely simple game, or you can add in the God cards to give the players special variable player powers. This is a pretty good game that I rate a 7.5. It also has a good looking table presence to it as well. Let's move on to another game, Exploding Kittens. Exploding Kittens is a game where you'll be drawing and playing cards, and to put it simply, if you ever draw an Exploding Kittens card and you can't mitigate it somehow, you are eliminated, and you play till only one player is left. I used to actively hate this game. This would have made a list of top 10 games I hate, but this has started to grow on me over the years. It's grown so much on me that now it gets a 6.5 rating for me, putting it in an average game for me. Not great, but not as bad as I once felt about this game. Moving on to Jaws now. Jaws is a mini versus 1 hidden movement game where one player takes control of the shark and the rest of the players will be trying to find and kill him. This game is split into 2 distinct phases that are completely different games. In the first half, Jaws will be circling the island and trying to eat swimmers while staying hidden, where the players are trying to strategically peg where Jaws is and get 2 barrels attached to him. After Jaws either eats 9 swimmers or gets 2 barrels attached to him, you switch to the second phase of the game, where you then have Jaws versus the players as they are on the orca boat and trying to bring his health to 0. Or Jaws will win if he destroys the boat or kills every player. This game is weird to me. I absolutely love the first half of the game and despise the second half. I'd give the first half an 8 and the second half a 5, so let's meet in the middle, giving this game a 6.5 rating. Let's move back to a card game now with Lost Cities. In Lost Cities, you will have a hand of cards that are numbered, and you will be laying them either on your side of the board, in that color, also in ascending order, thus activating that column, or else you will be laying the card in the middle, where it will be up for grabs to other players. When you activate a column, it is an automatic negative 20 points, but then you get to add the total of all the cards together in that column. There are also cards that will multiply that column. So you can have a column with huge points, but if you plan poorly or have bad luck, you could possibly have a ton of negative points, so you have to be careful. I love this game and give it an 8 rating, but if you like this game, definitely check out the app as well. Moving on to Dvonn. Dvonn is an abstract game in the Gifts Project series of games. Players take turns moving their pieces around the board and landing on top of other pieces, making that piece now part of their stack. A piece has to move the number of spaces depending on how high its own stack is. The player with the most chips in their stacks at the end of the game wins. I thought this was an alright game, giving it a 6.5, but after playing Yinch a few weeks ago in this series, I was kind of expecting more from this title. On to the next game here with Abandon All Artichokes. Abandon All Artichokes is an almost deck deconstruction game where each player starts with a hand of 10 artichokes. Each turn you will be drafting a vegetable card that will give you some ability, and most of them will help you get rid of artichokes. The first player that when they draw a hand of cards that doesn't have an artichoke in their hand wins. This is a game that I believe got similar type of buzz to Point Salad when it first came out, and I like Point Salad a lot, so I was pretty interested in this. But this really fell flat for me with a 6 rating. And I'm probably wrong about this game, and this might be a game that the mass public would really enjoy for a simpler game, but it just wasn't my cup of tea. Let's check out a bigger game now in Terraforming Mars. Terraforming Mars is beginning to become a classic game at this point that still sells very well, and it is around 5 years old at this point, which is impressive for board games nowadays. This is an engine building, card drafting game where players are trying to terraform Mars to the best of their abilities. The player that does the best job at that wins the game. I give the base game an 8.5, and the only reason it's not higher is because it runs a bit long for me. So if you feel the same way as me, I highly suggest to get the Prelude expansion, which speeds things up a bit for the game. So with the Prelude expansion, it goes to a 9 rating. And this week I played a solo game of this, which runs very smooth because there is no AI system. It is just you working on your puzzle. So this is a great solo game, and I'm giving it a 9 as well. Going to another popular game now with a roll and write with Silver and Gold. Silver and Gold is an extremely simple polyomino flip and write game. You'll be filling in shapes on your map cards with shapes being drawn from the deck. What is cool about this game is you are actually drawing on these cards, and they are good quality. I've played this game over 30 times and the cards are still holding up very well. This is a great gateway style game that I love introducing new people to. I give this a 7.5 rating, and this might be one of those games I believe belongs in every collection. Let's go to the cooperative game, Back to the Future Dice Through Time. Back to the Future Dice Through Time is a cooperative dice chucking game about players working as a team to return items that have been lost in time, back to their proper place in time. You'll be having to deal with Biff in each era that you are in. You can also leave behind some of your dice that players in a future time can pick up to assist them. I thought this was an okay game, giving it a 6.5, but this is only an initial rating, since we only got to play this once, so this rating could really go up or down from here. Let's move on to the next game, Trails of Tucana. Trails is a path-building flip and write. Each turn consists of flipping over 2 terrain cards and then drawing a line from anywhere on the map from one terrain type to an adjacent hex of the other terrain type. You will be trying to connect your paths to different symbols on the map, and it is also a race to connect to these different starting areas for bigger points. This is a game I think has a feel almost like Welcome to, where players are racing for certain goals. This game gets an 8 rating from me and is up there with some of my favorite roll and writes. Next we have a game I talked about in a video last week actually, with Lockup. Lockup is a mix of area majority and worker placement, and even mixed with some hidden elements. You have several numbered worker tiles at your disposal, and on your turn you place as many of them on one spot as you'd like. At the end of the round, the player with the higher power in a spot takes the best action for that spot. You also will be laying some of these workers upside down so others don't know which worker you lay down, so they are going to try and deduce what workers are where. I really like this game, giving it an 8.5 rating, and I'm really surprised this one doesn't get talked about more. Next, let's talk about Claim 2. Claim 2 is the sequel to a little two-player trick-taking game I really like. This uses fantasy races as the suit of the cards, and each fantasy race has some sort of special ability. You are trying to win the majority of each fantasy race. The player who has won the majority of the races wins the game. This is the exact same game as the original game, but just with new races and abilities. I do like the original better, but this is still good, getting a 7 rating from me. Let's move on to another filler game in Ticket to Ride New York. Ticket to Ride New York is the much smaller version of Ticket to Ride. This takes only around 20 minutes to play. It is almost the exact same game as the bigger box version, so I won't go into any details about that. I would recommend this for families with smaller children that would want a faster game than Ticket to Ride, but me personally, I give this game a 6.5 rating and would just much rather play the original. So let's move on quickly to the next game, Sushi Go. We talked about Go Nuts for Donuts earlier, that was obviously inspired by Sushi Go, so let's actually talk about Sushi Go. Sushi Go is a classic card drafting game about drafting different sushi dishes to collect sets that are worth varying amounts. This is such a simple game, and I would say if you're looking to show someone a drafting game, this is a great first step into showing off that mechanic. I played this for the first time in quite a while last week, and I forgot how simple yet enjoyable it is. I give it a 7 rating, which kind of surprised me. Now checking out another game I talked about in the underrated games last week with Snow Time. Snow Time is this sort of bluffing guessing game where everyone starts with the same hand of cards numbered 1 through 7 and a few special ability cards. Everyone lays down a card at the same time and places their card on the board in that numbered spot. Same numbered cards kill each other. If you're on the spot above someone else's card, you kill their card, and your goal is to collect fruit off of trees for points. So you are really trying to guess where everyone is going to play. This was a new game to me last week, and I really enjoyed the few plays of it I got into. I give it a 7.5 rating, and I'm looking forward to a few more plays of this. Now, let's have the talk about Magic the Gathering. Magic, which is the most popular collective card game of all time, I think. I have a few friends who really love Magic, and occasionally I will join them for a game. I don't need to talk about this one much, since I think probably everyone knows what this card game is. I do usually enjoy the game of Magic, but there are problems that I don't like with CCGs. If you are new to it or haven't spent the money on it like some others, and you are going to a Friday night Magic event to play this, it will not be fun probably. You will get wiped out fast without much resistance. So it gets a 6.5 rating from me. I like the game, but I'm not a fan of the CCG model of chasing down the best cards to try and compete. But if you have a casual group of players, I can sit down and enjoy myself thoroughly with this. Moving on to one of Pandemic's many rethemes in Pandemic Reign of Cthulhu. So this is the mandatory Cthulhu version of Pandemic. You replace the viruses with minions that are trying to summon up the Old One gods. This is a really interesting twist on Pandemic, where slowly Old One gods will become revealed and cause some kind of bad things to happen. I am a fan of the Pandemic games, and I think this one might be my favorite out of all of them, and it gets an 8.5 rating from me. And if you have Pandemic, I would say this has enough differences from the original to own both of them. Moving on to a kids game of sorts with King of Tokyo. Now this is a classic dice chucking game that I've played probably 50 times. My son, nephew, and I used to play this almost every weekend. You play as monsters in Tokyo, trying to control Tokyo and take down the other monsters. Last monster standing wins. The game looks nice and the dice are nice and chunky. I was able to show this to a few people this week at Zappapalooza and let one of them borrow this game to show to their daughter. I give this game a 7.5 rating, and this is a high recommend for anyone with children because who doesn't like occasionally pretending there's some huge monster rampaging through a city? Going to a card game now in Shamans. Shamans is a trick-taking game of sorts that involves some social deduction. Each player gets a secret roll card, the Shamans or the Shadow. The player or players that get the Shadow roll are trying to move the pawn onto the moon. How they move that pawn is by playing off suit from the original player. There are also special abilities players will be using throughout the round, even eliminating players. I had really high hopes for this game because I enjoy trick-taking, and this might be one of the nicest looking card games I've ever seen. But I thought it was just okay, giving it a 6.5 rating, because the special abilities of the game I just didn't find to be that interesting. So let's move on to Sheriff of Nottingham. Sheriff of Nottingham is a game I have been wanting to play for a couple years, but I had never gotten my hands on it until a friend brought it to Zappapalooza this weekend. It is a simple, fun game of bluffing and bribing whoever is the sheriff during that particular turn. I really enjoyed myself playing this. I'd say this could be a good icebreaker game. I'll give it a 7 for that, but I'm not sure how often I'd want to pull it out, but I did have a good time with this. Let's roll it back now to the Dinosaurs in Tiny Epic Dinosaurs. Tiny Epic Dinosaurs, another game in the Tiny Epic series. In this game, you will be trying to get certain dinosaurs in your pens to then use to complete different set collecting goals. If you enjoyed Dinosaur Island but wish it took half the time to play and set up, this might be a game for you. I liked it, giving it a 7 rating, and I would rank it pretty high in the Tiny Epic series for me, but not that I have been a huge fan of most of the Tiny Epic games. But let's check out now Doctor Who Time of the Daleks. I finally got this game off of my shelf of shame. This is a dice allocation game where you are trying to race against the Daleks to Gallifrey. This uses that system of placing dice like games like Elder Signs or the Rising series of games. This is a cooperative game, kind of. You are all trying to beat the Daleks, but you're also trying to race each other, which semi-cooperative games usually are not a positive thing for me. To be honest, I was disappointed in this game for a few reasons. The dice system they use that I've seen in other games, I like this one the least out of those. The game felt pretty repetitive to me and longer than it needed to be. And finally, there are only 4 different doctors to choose from in the base game, but they have cards that sync with all of the other doctors in Doctor Who, and those aren't even in the base game. So they are selling expansions with all the other doctors that are almost necessary if you want to have the full experience to this game, which is kind of a shady thing to me. This game gets a 6 rating, and the reason the rating is that high even is because it's still the best Doctor Who game that I have played. Let's move on to Flashpoint Fire Rescue. Flashpoint is another cooperative game that you play as a team of firefighters trying to rescue all the different people and animals in a burning building. Throughout the game, the fire will spread and even have explosions, so you are trying to manage the fire while still quickly moving around and rescuing as many civilians as possible. I do enjoy this game, giving it a 7 rating. It isn't amazing, but I do find it to be a fun cooperative experience. And now on to the final game today, which is Viticulture Essential Edition. Viticulture is one of my all-time favorite games. It is a worker placement game that has you running a vineyard, planting your grapes, harvesting fields, bottling wine, and then finally selling the wine. It is a worker placement game that works really well at all player counts, in my opinion. The thing I enjoy most about this game is the summer and winter cards that give you some kind of unique power. This game is a 10 rating for me, and is such an elegant, smooth game that is very intuitive. I tried this one out for the first time solo this week, and I instantly started kicking myself that I hadn't tried it before. The solo mode gets a 10 as well. The AI system it uses literally takes 1 minute to learn, and it's so simple. This may be my favorite AI system a solo mode has ever put in. And that will wrap up this reviews and ratings episode and adjourn this meeting. What do you guys think of my ratings? Were they too high? Were they too low? Tell me in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this content, as always, make sure to like and subscribe to see more weekly content from me at the board meeting in the future. I hope you all have an amazing day, and take care, everyone. Waiting for the garbage truck to go by. Come on, Mr. Garbage Truck. Keep driving. Get off my street so I can keep recording.